Hello, Gutsy women. It's Brenda Eckert talking to you from, I guess I'm in an RV in South Carolina. Today we have a special guest, Gutsy woman Julie Rains. Julie is a writer, an investor, and a cycling enthusiast, and she joins us from North Carolina. Welcome, Julie. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
So, can you give us just a little bit of a background give us a little bit of background information?
Okay. Well, I'll just say that cycling is a love. I'm going to start there. Something I did a lot was a little kid, riding around neighborhoods, and then as an adult, kind of developed a fear of riding out on the road, and then was able to overcome that over many years. But now it's something that I do a lot of, and I think this year I'll have about 2,000 miles in so far. Um, I've got one. I've got a ride scheduled after our interview as well. But grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Went to school at UNC Chapel Hill. Majored in business there. Really love business. Love the idea of business, not always working in it. Um, and then I've been an investor for since my 20s, and some of that has helped me, have some free time and have the wherewithal to get out and do some things that I enjoy. But even when my room was broke, I like to hike and get outside, but something that I really developed as I've gotten older as well.
So, you talk about overcoming your fear of, I guess, cycling on the road. How, what was the fear about, and how did you overcome it?
Well, the fear was really of, I guess, being hit by a car. um, Being on the roads was could be kind of scary. It's something that I did all the time as a kid, and even in high school, I used to ride. I rode my bike to high school, and it was on some fairly busy roads, but it just never even crossed my mind to be worried. And I was like the only person doing it, but I did it every day. But I guess maybe I think this happens to a lot of people. You just get scared of everything. You start seeing the risk. You start maybe have a family or people that you really care about. You don't want to be gone. You want to be healthy for them. And so some of those kind of created more fears. But it was just kind of a slow process, something I started getting into. For me, I know some people they go out on the road and they're done, they're good. It probably took me several years to get out there and then realize there's other things to be scared of, like dogs running out in the middle of nowhere, or squirrels occasionally. But I think the love of doing it helped me overcome the fear.
Okay, are there so when you think about fears, I mean you mentioned something too. I think as you get older and you have more people depending on you, I mean, do you feel like the fear level rises? Does it take more courage to get out there and do things?
So for me, it did, and I think for other people, it does sometimes. That you don't want to shake you like the status quo, and you don't really want to shake that up. And I had it really when I started riding. I had a young child. He was like in elementary school, and I just every time I would worry about him. um, but I think as I got older, it actually became it became easier to confront the fears because it was like I only have a certain amount of time left to do things.
Right.
Um, I had a little bit, now that I'm remembering this, I had a little bit of a scare. I had these weird tingling feelings in my body, um, and and I went to the doctor, and they said, he asked me more about it, and I explained it to him, and he was like, well, I think you're fine, if you had described it in a more extreme way, you might have MS. And bike MS, multiple sclerosis, is a big event in this area. And so that really kind of switched my thinking some at the time, because I thought, well, I could stay active and enjoy myself, or I could have a disease that might cripple me in, a few years. And, which path am I going to take? So I just decided to take the other. It was still scary, but I decided to take that path of pursuing more of health, pursuing something that I wanted to do, not really knowing, what would happen. And for me, it's been, 15, 20 years and nothing has surfaced. I do have some friends who have that, and the drugs that they're on have been helpful for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
So
I said, it's a big, go ahead.
right. So for we with the Gutsy Women Club, I mean, there are women right now who may have MS and who may have some medical conditions which prevents them from doing some things or inhibits them. And there's are it's like at what point do you have this decision point as to like, okay, I'm gonna give in to this, or I'm gonna go out with a bang and do as much as I can. So is that something you think of? I'll ask you something a little bit philosophical. Do you think like, like being gutsy, is that something that you're born with? Is that something you learn?
I think it's something that you learn, and I think it's going to look different from everybody else. It's something that I had to learn. Maybe I should say that, or maybe relearn. Think about how fearless I was. Maybe not totally fearless as a kid, but picking up spiders or going out, playing with snakes and stuff as a kid, and then and then later as an adult being scared. But it is something to me, one fear after the other, to try to dismantle those and to try to deal with those. And I think it's really hard to say if you've got an illness. I know some people that are do really well on some medications are out there, and others that really want to be careful because they want to preserve what they have. And they might express that in a different way. Maybe they spend more time hiking or kayaking, for example. But those things can still be,
Yeah.
to me, just pushing yourself a little bit can really make a huge difference.
Right. Since you work in finances, and can you talk a bit about like the mindset, especially of women? I mean, I was reading your website, and you talked about how what you thought might have been common knowledge about like being an original investor, others didn't realize. Other quite educated women didn't know what you were talking about. So can you talk a little bit about the mindset, sort of, what the expectations are for women in terms of, handling their money, and what are the limitations? How do we limit ourselves?
That's a good question, because I think everybody has their own limits that they apply to themselves. I know I have some, and I'm sure other people have some. Mine just happen to be different. And I think the story you're referencing was there was a woman that I worked with that was independently wealthy, and so my friends were saying, "Well, how did that work?" And there was a small grocery store chain that she invested it in, and it's a kind of a sort of epic story, or it was a while back. $1,000. Somebody just said, "Hey, I need $1,000 to expand this store," and 10 years later, she's independently wealthy. And how does that happen? And so for me, investing became very natural. It was just something that was a business major. Setting money aside, I was a born saver. That's something that I did, and the next logical step to me was investing. And some people, that really scares people. They're scared of losing money. And I think for the women that I knew, they were really gutsy in totally different ways than I was. Very focused on their careers. I won't say I was really focused. I mean, I thought I was, but not quite as focused there. But very focused. Done really well. Graduate degrees. And to me, for any woman though, if they can think about not just working for a living, but having their money work for them, that's the big mindset shift. And that's something that can happen through investing. And I'll say one of the other limits I think I see is saying that you need to invest a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Some people love, say, index investing. I happen to love individual stock investing because that's just how I started out, and it makes sense to me. So, not limiting based on what somebody you read or some recommendation that somebody else makes, but learning to develop your own style.
Right, right. I mean, I have my own experiences of, investing in a, Chinese wind power, which went under, and it's like, okay, all of those experiences taught me something, and now I'm comfortable with my approach. But you're absolutely correct too. Like with the gutsy women, to me, being gutsy might be one extreme, jumping out of an airplane, which I don't think I'm going to do. To other people, going back to college in your 40s or 50s, that's a gutsy move. So everybody has their different version of what it means to be gutsy. So I am, we've got a good variety here. You wrote something that caught my eye. You said you were a reformed rule follower. I'm intrigued.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, and this is funny. So I probably found out that I was maybe a rule follower based on some of my cycling experiences. Um, I just remember sitting at a rest stop somewhere, not a rest stop, a group of us went out cycling, and one of the guys just looked at me and said, "You're a rule follower, aren't you?" And I was like, it just came out of the blue. I think he'd worked in counseling in high school or something that, but it was definitely, it was a true thing. And one of the ladies that I would ride with was like always a rule breaker. She was always finding some way to break a rule. For example, if we go to a charity ride and they say we want to start exactly at 8 o'clock, she might want to beat the crowd and we'll start at 7:30, and we're like, well, it's public roads, it's okay. And so it's just kind of these little small things. Like if there's a parking space that says don't park there, I'll park, I need to make sure I park in the right place. And, but those are small things that I have to I consciously overcome. It'd be any types of rule. I'm not sure if I can think of, some other ones, but if there's a sign posted that says don't do X, I will not do X. That's just the way have always sort of grew up and how I was trained. I think part of that is because I'm very, something I've learned is I'm very focused on numbers and words, but I don't always pick up on social cues. And so the way I got along sometimes was just by following the rules and not trying to figure out what else was going on. So it's definitely been a hurdle that I've overcome. I'm still overcoming it though.
So it's interesting because for women, very often to follow their dreams, they have got to sort of break society's expectations of them. So, for you growing up, did you always have the support to do what you wanted to do? Were there expectations that you would do A, B, or C, and you've gone a different way?
Yeah, I don't know if that's an excellent question. I grew up in the '60s and '70s, and I don't think women had opportunities, but it wasn't like the world was wide open. There wasn't people recruiting you to say, "Hey, you can be anything you want to be." My parents always really supported me in my education. They sent me to college. They paid for my college education. So I don't know if I really deviated a lot there, or didn't really have. I didn't really have. I won't say I always had a great vision of what that future should look like. I did work took a first job out of school, had hoped to move to a big city. I graduated during a recession, ended up in a small town. Enjoyed the small town. That's really one reason why I enjoyed, getting outside, because I got to have now there was nothing else to do but go hiking. We were near, maybe a half an hour away from a national park. So going off there, but eventually went through a couple corporate buyouts, met my husband, got married. So I think things probably looked maybe more typical from the outside, and sometimes from the inside as well.
So can you describe your career a bit more? Is what
Yes.
you've done? Okay.
Yes. So I got out of college, went to work as a financial analyst. I was a business finance major. Worked for a company for a couple of years, and they were bought out. But by this time I'd gotten married. So I decided to stay in a small town, but there weren't really that many job opportunities. So I went to work as a staff accountant for a textile and apparel manufacturer. Heard some rumors of there being a buyout there. Wasn't that crazy about the company. So I decided I'm not going to stay I'm not going to, be laid off from a company I didn't even like. So I went to work for another company, which was then bought out in a couple of years. It was all during the '80s, during the leverage buyout period. So based on that, I decided to start a resume writing business. Was good at writing. It's something that I had done. It really helped me combine my love of business and writing. And I learned a lot from people. I did that probably about 20 years or so, and then just really, went through a couple of recessions and just kind of got a little burned out from that. So then I kind of pulled. Speaking of going to college, I actually went back and did an online graduate program in technology and communication, and that was really a big step for me as well. The graduate courses seemed kind of simple, but it was very demanding mentally. But I made it. I did that a couple of years of that, and then during that transition, getting burned out of resume writing, doing some of the graduate work, I decided to go into blogging and writing more for myself. But it's been kind of like an unlearning process for me. Um, that I did some freelance writing for a while, and it's like I wanted to adhere to the rules that they established, but then I wasn't always able to express myself. And so I'm actually doing some other. I've done some work with some of Seth Godin's. If you're familiar with him, he's got his akimbo workshops, and that's kind of helped me unlearn some of the conventions about how you should write and what you should say, and not be controversial, and um, start out,
Yeah,
never use the word I or whatever. So that's this is very much a process of unlearning for me.
that's fascinating because I've worked on mostly academic type of work, and I've got a blog and same type of thing. Having to learn how to write a very different way, but also to for me the challenge has been like allow yourself to be vulnerable. You don't do that in a professional career, but you do that in blogging a lot of times. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and so one of the courses somebody suggested Brene Brown's books, and so I just gobbled those up, and yeah, and practicing that is that it resonates so much more with people.
Yeah,
You know,
it's well, even when you started as a financial analyst, I don't think there were many women in that field, were there?
so there were a fair amount. Accounting was probably a more heavily, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
area, and I happen to have I have an older sister who was a business major like me, and actually got her MBA, and so she worked in that field as well. She's always considered the smarter one, but yeah. So I mean, I guess I had some some basic role models there
Yeah, it's interesting
as well.
because
So there were some.
it, I mean, the other piece of it is it sounds like you've pivoted from, you've gone back to school, you've pivoted to more writing, and part of it is made maybe just some dissatisfaction with, working for the boss. I mean, at this point, it sounds like you're working more for yourself and doing what you want to be doing. Is that
Yes, that would be
okay?
correct. Yes,
Okay, and what?
yes, and just trying to get. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
No,
I was
go.
gonna say, just trying to learn how to connect with people. I think that's another little dynamic that's kind of odd for me. Is you want to be able to connect with people and reach people, but to a certain extent, it's like, well, do you want to mold yourself how people want to see you, or do you want to present your real self? I mean, you want to present your real self, of course, but there's also you're not working for the main corporate office or whatever, but there's still some tension there as
Well,
far as wanting to
right.
write in a way that people understand.
Well, the challenge I find too in this day and age is social media. So whatever you put out there, you have to be prepared for people attacking not just your article, but who you are. So it seems as if we have to grow a very thick skin these days to put ourselves out there.
Yeah, which is why I'm probably not as active in social media. But that, for me, that's one step at a time.
So when we have, it's now what, we're early September. We've hit September 1st. We are still dealing with coronavirus, high unemployment, the economy. People have lost their jobs, and so are you seeing an impact in terms of people's ability to invest, or are people thinking that maybe this is just not in their dreams? I mean, it's some people have done very well. A lot of people just have lost everything. So we're in this very uncertain time. I don't know how that impacts what you write about, or your even how you can help people.
Right, right, and that's a difficult situation because I feel like there is basically a divide that's gotten wider. I mean, it was already the inequities and things were there, but they've gotten worse. Um, and what I the process of me kind of coming to terms with what I want to do and who I want to reach is looking at people, for the most part, are still be doing well, or at least have employment. A lot of people that I know are still working, basically from home. So basically, the audience that I would like to reach is this, and this is that's like me, is somebody who's gotten, hopefully has their house close to paid for, has some retirement savings, has still interested in investing, which I think is still good opportunities for that, but that will find ways, and this is part of what I'm searching for now, is find ways, how do we help bridge that gap between those who don't have, who are having problems, and what they're and people, the haves and the have-nots, and what can I do? The really simple thing in my community right now is supporting the food banks, and there's a blessing box at my church that people have been filling up, and then I haven't actually been grocery shopping. My husband's done most of the grocery shopping, but I went today and got a few things, and so I'm going to go over there and put a few items in there. Looking for other ways to support, the needs in the community, and then also wondering, what else can we do broader? Because there is a lot of inequity.
Yes, there definitely is. I mean, the other argument that I see, and even with the folks that they still have their jobs. So I'm out here RVing, and I know that all of a sudden we have all of these people buying RVs. So it's there, and people probably who can't afford it. So they've got some. Maybe they've taken their unemployment, maybe they've taken some type of government relief package or whatever, but they've splurged on the RV or the boat or whatever it is that they have splurged on. And so there's this sense of, well, we could all be gone tomorrow, so I better enjoy it today. And then there are the other folks who have discovered that they can make and sell masks online, and they've pivoted. It almost feels to me like it's become more dangerous to depend on an employer in these days, that the more that you can be innovative and create a side hustle or your own business, almost the more security you have. So I feel like things have switched this year.
Well, and it's funny you should say that, because you brought back a memory. That's how I felt after those 3 companies that I was with that got bought out. I definitely felt like stability. I was pursuing stability, through entrepreneurship, and that was back, say, in the 90s. And so I definitely feel that you had to have some sort of other skill, and even to me, skills like I have a garden. There's different skill sets that we can bring that make us less dependent on an employer. There's definitely unfortunately, there's some things we're still dependent on as far as even health. Well, I mean, there's healthcare outside of that, but
Right.
there are a lot of things that we're still dependent on. But the more we can wean ourselves off that employer, that's a good point. And that's one reason why I want to encourage people to invest. Not so much that they'll make, hopefully they'll make a lot of money, but but to provide another source of income and a source of wealth that's outside of an employer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also something that, the stock market doesn't care whether you're male or female or what color you are or anything else. You do have to have money, and that can be, or extra money to invest, but that can be an issue. But that's one reason I like to encourage people to invest, because it's it's a way of creating income.
The interesting piece for me as a financial coach, so I can talk about mindsets and people understand retirement accounts, and I can walk them through that process, emergency savings and mortgage and all of those things. And then I'll hit the word investing. And it's like total blank, total freeze. Like, I don't know anything about it. I'm uncomfortable with it. And for some of the women, they have so much in savings, so they've done okay. And they save and they save and they save for the rainy day, and it's not earning any interest. And over the long run, you're losing money because of inflation. It's not a good deal. But they're so uncomfortable investing, even in some index funds that's going to track the market, or a bond fund even, that to me I've seen that as a roadblock for many women, that they're they can understand everything, and then it's like, okay, now what do I do? I don't really know how to invest. So even in retirement funds, sometimes they're sitting in a really conservative, the default fund, because they don't know how to invest that. So I don't know if there's a good starting point where we could get people comfortable. I mean, do you recommend a book or an approach or something?
So, I mean, my what I'm going to probably say is going to be a little bit technical, but I'll kind of back into that. Um, One of my favorite, well, I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me. I'll try to find it later. It was a book about, uh, discounted cash flow, investing, value investing. And, but that's a little bit more technical. That's but what I'm doing is I don't like to buy the stock market. I like to buy a business. I like to invest in a business. And to me, that makes more intuitive sense than buying an index fund. I'm not trying to trash index funds. I'm just saying, for me, and I think for some people, buying a company um, might make more sense for them. I'm also going to back up a little bit. I haven't broken the code here, so I'll commiserate with you all that. I did a little bit of research on default investing for like 401ks,
Hmm.
and I think it was Thaler's research and behavioral science research. But basically, what a lot of companies, they wanted to get people to invest. They wanted people to put money away in their retirement accounts, but they also didn't want to be responsible for them losing money. And so they set some of their default settings at these very low, the minimum maybe 3%, and then for their contributions. And I'll say anything you invest is good. Anything you put in there is good. I'm not saying, but they'll slow, and then they'll also would do like the tick mark would be the default would be a money market fund. And so that was really to protect the company. It really wasn't to help you or the investor or the retiree or the employee save for retirement. And so to a certain extent that's been a disservice. And I don't know though, is a rule follower, if you're a rule follower, you might say, well, that's what the company's recommending, so I'm going to stick with that. Um, so that would, to me, that would be one entry point. If you're already, in putting money into your 401k, is to consistently do that and do it as an go ahead and invest in that. That is one place where I invest in index funds, mutual funds, is to go ahead and invest that way. That would be a stepping stone. And then for me, I know it does. It strikes fear in a lot of people's. If you say about investing and some of the numbers, there's a lot of numbers. I'll go on my brokerage website, and you'll see all these little numbers, these technical analysis. I have no idea what any of that means. Well, maybe a little bit, but but I do understand financial statements and cash flow statements and balance sheets and things like that, and that's how a business is run. And so some of my work, even though sometimes it seemed very frustrating when I wrote for resumes to help other people get jobs, I did learn a lot even more about business, just hearing people tell me about their work, and how a company is run or not run. So learning about business is a great way, and then thinking about just buying a stock or company rather than a number.
Yeah, that's a good approach, and at least now they've got some targeted retirement funds. So for folks who feel intimidated, but so we
Mhm.
talk about I at the Gutsy Women Club. It's dream, plan, save, and do. So it's, at least when I was younger, and I think a lot of people when they're younger, they jump from the dream to the do, and then things happen, and you start to have face consequences that may not be so great. So it's like you get older, you start working on the planning and hopefully saving. But there's that point of doing. It's you can put everything in place, and then it's like, okay, how do I pull the switch and actually do it? That's almost like it's almost a matter of courage, maybe a little bit of having some support network. But can you talk a little bit about, like, you know, in your experience, how do you get to the do part?
So from I often try to encourage people to do, and sometimes that's successful, and then I try to do as well. For me, is to take the first step would be to take small steps, and if you're going on a bike ride, you can be, it doesn't have to be on the road, it can be on the greenway or the rails to trails or whatever, and to really embrace that as being an accomplishment, to start small and do that. And then I think you mentioned that this the support network, that really was key for me to develop, because I really kind of, I guess you would say, spun my wheels, and not really, I bought a bike and got out a little bit, but I didn't really have a good support network. It's like you had to be a certain speed in order to join groups, and I wasn't that speed, but how did I get to that speed? And, there was just this catch-22 that kind of went on. And eventually I met people, and I joined a biking team. That was like a big step, just to send an email to somebody saying, can I join your team? And I felt very uncomfortable with that, but I just kind of kept at it, and I got some encouragement. And then, through that, met some folks that said, hey, Julie, we'll take you out and we'll ride together. And it was just a very slow process to me, but having that network of people that would encourage me and teach me and coach me really made a huge difference. And so, and pushing myself when I didn't feel like it, knowing that difference between not feeling like it and just being hesitant, which is probably took me a few years to overcome and really get that. I'm not even sure if I know how to do it now, but there is a little bit of there, is this the perfect time, or it's never going to be a perfect time to just go out and do something.
Yeah,
but definitely having that support network helped.
well, and it sounds like now, like, you are instrumental in growing the whole biking community in your area.
Yeah, and I haven't been as active maybe this year as I haven't in the past couple of years, but for a few years, there was a meetup that I didn't start, but that I helped manage a couple of years. And the woman that started it noticed that there's a lot of people that were kind of recreational cyclists, didn't really have a good outlet. The people that were, hardcore, we call, maybe the young people and the young strong men that would go out. They had they found their people, but the average people had doing that. So she developed this meetup group, and then a friend of mine managed it for a couple of years. And during that time, it was something like, I don't know if you're familiar with Meetup. I had never done Meetup. I was scared to do Meetup, so but I had some people tell me about it, and they encouraged me to come, and so I finally did Meetup, and that was a big deal. But so, say when you have a meetup, you have people sign up. The information is out there as far as the meeting place and the speed and the what else, the details. But I, as an introvert, I don't always know what to say to people. So I would try to look at the list of who was going to be there and make sure I could meet people and welcome them. And then if there was somebody new, I identified that person, and then introduced them to the people there. And so it was really, I think, a great way, and it still exists, for people to come out and, meet people and kind of learn in a safe environment. And this is both for men and women, something which is interesting. I think even when it's for women, that was kind of maybe the impetus, but men and women both need that.
You bring up a really excellent point, because the network doesn't come to you. You go to the network, or you create the network. And then also, for people who are introverts, you're out of your comfort zone, at least initially. So, that's yet another sort of fear to overcome, and you approach that. But I think that is a very good point, that you can't do this all alone, but you also have to take a step out and try to find that network that'll help you grow.
Right. And I think it's interesting that how that kind of evolved. It definitely took me several years to do that, to get from point A to that point. one thing I'll say is that sometimes I see people, want to get involved. Maybe they have a friend that's involved, but they're worried that friend is, whether it's cycling or hiking or something, that friend is too advanced or they're too whatever, and so they turn down invitation after invitation. So sometimes if the network does come to you, grab it.
Right.
So
True. Good
but
point.
yeah,
So at the Women Club, we talk a lot about dreams. Uh, what are your dreams for the next 5, 10 years? What do you think? What would you be doing?
and did you say what you're going to do?
Dreams.
There's a little bit of audio there.
What? How do you? What are your dreams?
So that is a good question, and I've had more time to think about that during the pandemic. And it's like, well, uh, so my dreams really are to obviously keep doing what I'm doing that's working, and since you mentioned that, is to take, carve out more time to, engage people that maybe are on the peripheral or they need that support system. I think for me, what I've seen is I've, was part of that support system in the cycling, and, found what I needed, helped other people, and then now I'm kind of coasting a little bit, and would like to, reach out more and, get more people involved and get, and help people reach their dreams.
Well, I know that
As I learn.
you've done some hiking in New Zealand, and do you have any
Yes.
adventure plans once it gets safe again?
So that's a good question. Because I'm hesitant. It's like, should I start planning and get excited, or should I not plan and get it? What should I do? My daughter-in-law is interested in going to the Camino, and so I started looking into that. That's like if you do the whole Camino, depending if you do the original, I think it's like a 30-day event, and I think I have time to do that, but I'm not sure with her
That
work schedule what she'll have.
that's Spain, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think it's France. I think it ends in Spain, and I think there's different paths to that. I think the original is starting in France.
Okay, got
So
it.
yeah, just some more epic hikes.
Yeah,
And
that's
I've done I did a rails to trail from Pittsburgh to DC last year, and I'd like to do some more rails to trails. Those are fun, and that's something that's very, I won't say easy, but it's something that I think is people find more accessible since it's not on the road.
yeah, yeah. Well, that all I
Um,
can see that creates some happy thoughts for you. So, um, any last words of advice for people who want to be gutsy women?
Yeah, sure. I just, taking those small steps, a lot of times I think they are very important and they really are going to get you somewhere. I think for me, I didn't think those small steps. I feel like I took, step forward, step backward, wasn't really getting to my destination, but you look up, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years later, and you realize you've made a lot of progress. So just keep taking those small steps.
That is very good advice, and I concur totally. So that will wrap up yet another episode of our Gutsy Women profile. Thank you so much. One more thing, Julie, talk about your website. We almost forgot. Invest2thrive.com.
Yes, investingtothrive.com. And my concept there was to try to help people think about ways they can invest in themselves, invest in the stock market, to thrive. I think we all want to thrive in some way. So I'm still kind of developing some of the concepts there, but I like to hopefully talk about some, stock market investing, and then other types of investing. I think like goals, like college and retirement, those types of things.
Perfect, perfect. And I will be adding a link in the profile. So, folks, that's it. Well, we're going to wrap up. And thank you so much for joining us. Until next week, I'm out of here. Bye bye.